Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really powerful. It's called unconditional positive regard, or UPR. It's this attitude, this way of approaching people that can genuinely change how they feel about themselves and how they succeed, really.
Absolutely. And it's not just, being vaguely nice. UPR is a specific concept,
Mhm.
really central to Carl Rogers' client-centered therapy. It shapes relationships in a fundamental way.
So our mission today is to kind of unpack that.
Yeah, let's pull out the core ideas from Rogers, see how UPR works in therapy, but then, crucially, how we can maybe translate that into everyday life, things like parenting or even just how we think about ourselves.
Okay, let's start with the term itself. Unconditional positive regard. What does that actually mean? This complete acceptance and love idea.
Well, the general psychological definition is pretty much that. It's an attitude of total acceptance. Seeing someone as inherently human, inherently valuable, inherently lovable. It means that deep down, nothing they do can shake your fundamental regard for their worth as a person.
Okay, but that word acceptance, it feels a bit tricky, doesn't it? Like, does accepting someone unconditionally mean I have to be okay with, say, my kid doing something totally unacceptable?
That's the critical distinction. And Rogers was very clear on this back in 1951. UPR is about accepting the person, their core humanity, their intrinsic worth. It operates at a deeper level than just surface behavior.
So you can disapprove of an action.
Absolutely. You can strongly disapprove of an action, a behavior, without withdrawing your fundamental positive regard for the human being doing it. That's the core.
Right. And in therapy, this lack of judgment is obviously key. It builds trust.
That's everything. If a client thinks a therapist might be shocked or, judge them,
Yeah, hold back.
exactly, they'll filter what they say. They won't share the stuff they see as bad or shameful, and that just kills the therapeutic process. UPR is the attitude that really fosters that deep trust needed for healing and, well, real change.
You mentioned Rogers describing this as like laying aside your own views
Mhm.
to enter their world. That sounds incredibly difficult, almost like deep empathy.
It is deep empathy. He literally said it's laying aside your own views and values in order to enter another's world without prejudice.
Mhm.
But here's a really interesting point from the sources. To do that effectively, to really step into someone else's, maybe even bizarre world without getting lost or judgmental.
You need to be pretty solid yourself first.
Precisely. You need to be secure enough in your own self that you don't feel threatened or overwhelmed by their perspective.
Yeah.
Your own foundation has to be strong.
That's a key insight. You have to be okay yourself to truly accept someone else unconditionally. Okay, before we get practical, let's understand why this works. Why did Rogers believe this seemingly simple attitude had such profound effects? What's it tapping into?
Well, Rogers suggested UPR connects with two really fundamental instinctual human drives. First, there's this innate push towards being socially constructive, like connecting positively with others. And second, there's a need for self-determination, the feeling that we have the right and the responsibility to choose our own path in life. UPR helps clear away the obstacles, the judgments that get in the way of both of those things.
So if UPR is the ideal, what's the opposite? What gets in the way? Rogers had a term for that too, right?
He did. Conditional positive regard.
Mm.
And it's basically what most of us experience a lot of the time, unfortunately. This is when love, acceptance, approval, it's all conditional. It's given when you do what's expected, maybe withdrawn subtly or not so subtly when you don't.
Right. The message becomes, I love you if, or you're okay when.
Exactly. You're only seen as lovable or acceptable when you follow the rules, meet the expectations, do the right things.
And the result is, people might tick all the boxes, look successful on the outside, but inside.
Their sense of self-worth can be really underdeveloped. They might make the right choices, but it's often driven by seeking external approval, not internal conviction. Rogers really believed that kids who mainly get this conditional acceptance from parents often struggle with low self-worth later on. They just never internalize that feeling of being fundamentally enough.
Which is where the therapist comes in. You mentioned earlier UPR acting as a kind of proxy parent.
Yeah, that idea from Wilkins is interesting. The therapist's UPR can provide that missing piece, that consistent, non-judgmental acceptance the person maybe didn't get enough of growing up. And feeling that safety, perhaps for the first time, allows them to finally open up, explore their issues, and start to heal that shaky self-concept.
Okay, so therapy can provide a corrective experience, but ideally we'd want to foster this from the start. Let's shift this into parenting. What's the goal of using UPR with kids?
The goal is pretty ambitious, actually. It's to help build that deep internal self-worth and self-confidence right from the beginning. When kids feel unconditionally accepted, they feel freer. Free to try things, free to mess up, free to be spontaneous, without this constant fear of losing love or approval.
Which sounds like the groundwork for what Rogers called self-actualization,
Yeah.
becoming your best self.
Exactly. It's about creating the conditions for them to grow into who they genuinely are.
Now, this sounds great in theory, but in the heat of the moment, when your kid has just done something infuriating, it's hard. The sources mention a specific technique about language.
Yes. Technique 1, modify your words. This is about consciously making that separation we talked about, the person versus the action, really explicit. So even when you're disappointed or angry about a behavior, you need to communicate clearly that your underlying love and acceptance for them, the child, hasn't changed.
Can you give an example? Like, what's the difference in phrasing?
Sure. So instead of saying something global like, you are embarrassing and your behavior was unacceptable, which kind of condemns the whole child, you pivot. You might say something like, look, I love you and I always will. But right now, I'm really disappointed by what you did, and we need to talk about why that wasn't okay.
So you state the love first, then address the specific action.
Precisely. The distinction needs to be crystal clear, especially for a child who's still developing their sense of self.
Okay, technique deals with those moments when a child actually admits they did something wrong. The instinct is often to jump in with consequences or lectures.
Right. And this technique asks you to resist that immediate urge. When a child admits guilt, it's actually a huge opportunity. Instead of focusing solely on punishment or your disapproval, the idea is to focus on their feelings about what happened.
How does that work?
You ask them, how do you feel about what you did? Or what was going on for you then? You guide them towards understanding their own actions and making better choices based on their internal compass, feeling good about themselves, aligning with their own sense of right and wrong, not just avoiding getting caught.
So it shifts the focus from external rules to internal motivation, building self-accountability.
Exactly. It's a much deeper form of learning.
Were there other key techniques mentioned for applying UPR in parenting?
Yeah, a couple of others that reinforce the same principle. Showing respect is huge, offering choices where possible, actually listening to their decisions sometimes, and explaining the reasons behind your rules and decisions. That explanation itself shows respect.
Not just because I said so.
Right. And also helping them achieve competence, encouraging independence, giving them diverse opportunities to face challenges and experience success. That builds confidence too.
Okay, this framework really highlights how UPR isn't just a therapy concept. It's fundamental to building trust and healthy development, whether in the clinic or at home. It all seems to come back to this core paradox that Rogers identified.
Ah, yes. It's such a powerful insight, maybe the heart of humanistic psychology, really, he said. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
It feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? We often think we need to dislike something about ourselves intensely to motivate change.
We do. But Rogers flips that. He suggests that true, lasting change doesn't come from self-rejection, but from self-acceptance. When you accept yourself, flaws and all, you create a sense of safety. And it's only from that place of safety that you can truly risk growing and changing.
So acceptance isn't complacency. It's the necessary starting point.
Exactly. And when we extend that acceptance to others, genuinely accept them as they are, we're essentially giving them permission to accept themselves.
Yeah.
And that self-acceptance is what unlocks their own capacity for growth and change. It's not about giving up on improvement. It's about creating the conditions where improvement feels possible.
And Rogers had a simple phrase for cultivating this attitude, didn't he?
Huh.
Something to remember for ourselves.
He did. Just a simple reminder. I'm not perfect, but I'm enough.
That feels like a good place to land. We started with UPR in therapy, accepting the person, not always the behavior, and saw how it applies in our relationships, especially parenting, to foster that sense of self-worth and potential.
And we touched on that idea that UPR in therapy might be making up for acceptance missed in childhood. So if this kind of acceptance is so vital for development, for trust, for change, it leads to a really interesting question for you, the listener, to think about. Roger said we need to be secure ourselves to offer this genuine, non-judgmental regard to others. So the question is, how much does our ability to give unconditional, positive regard actually depend on the UPR we manage to give ourselves first?
Something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.